The graph above represents the parent function of an exponential function. An exponential function is a function that has an horizontal asymptote, which is defined by the equation y equals blank space. It is known that the reference point is 1, 0, and this 1 may change due to the vertical and horizontal translations. In the following example, y equals a, x minus h plus k. By isolating x in the parentheses, you will define the horizontal shift, and the value of k will determine the vertical shift. Another important concept to consider are the reflections. If a function only has a reflection over the x-axis, this will change in a decreasing way, representing a decay. If it has only a reflection over the y, the behavior will be the same, since it will change to a decay graph. The domain will always be real numbers, and the range will be limited by the horizontal asymptote. Finally, if the function has both reflections, this will represent an increasing graph, which will be interpreted as an exponential growth.
The amount of nuclear waste that was released from the meltdown was immense. Nuclear waste had an exponential growth effect, and it made it really difficult to clean it up. The nuclear waste will eventually fall in exponential decay. Meltdowns release enormous amounts of radiation at an amazing speed, making it really dangerous and difficult to evacuate. Nuclear waste remains radioactive for a very long time. Each nuclear reaction causes one or more subsequent nuclear reactions, leading to the possibility of propagating a series of these reactions. This chain reaction is responsible for exponentially increasing rates in reactions, increasing the number of atoms as produced in chemical explosions. Radioactive waste naturally decays over time. It has to be isolated and confined in appropriate facilities for enough time. There's long-lived radiation surrounding the former Chernobyl plant. The area won't be safe for human habitation for at least 20,000 years. 1:23 a.m., April 26, 1986. The world was seconds away from its worst nuclear accident. Reactor number 4 exploded. The disaster brought death and disease. It made clear the dangers of nuclear power. Chernobyl accident is the most serious accident in history of nuclear history. Fires continued for 10 days, and it led to huge amounts of radioactive materials being released into the environment and a radioactive cloud spreading over much of Europe. The most contaminated areas around the reactor is Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. The accident affected 600,000 people in emergency, containment, cleaning, and recovery operations. Approximately 1,000 people, workers, were affected directly from radiation on the first days of the accident. More than 5 million people that live in the areas are considered to be contaminated with radioactive materials. 116,000 people live in the exclusion zone, which was the closest to the power plant, and they were evacuated in the spring and summer of the same year. During the accident, blast effects caused 2 deaths within the facility. Later, 134 were hospitalized with acute radiation symptoms, of which 28 firemen and employees died in the days to months afterwards from the effects of acute radiation syndrome. In addition, approximately 14 cancer deaths amongst this group of initially hospitalized survivors was to follow within the next 10 years. Whilst among the wider population, an excess of 15 childhood thyroid cancer deaths have been documented as of 2011.
Exponential growth is the growth whose rate becomes even more rapid in proportion to the growing total number or size. All types of equations containing 2 unknown x and y variables may be inserted in a coordinate system. These types of equations are known as functions. Exponential decay is the decrease in a quantity according to the nuclear energy is released into the atmosphere, which can cause many environmental problems such as global warming. Uranium is not burned in a nuclear power plant as coal is, so there are no emissions from it, and it is not clean. There are actually 2 nuclear energy plants in Mexico. They are both located in Laguna Verde, in Mexico City. Nuclear energy is very dangerous since the meltdowns release radiation in a very high speed and the nuclear waste remains active for a very long time. It also contaminates the ecosystem, but the energy plant generates a lot of electricity for Mexico and it is a better way of getting energy. It is hard to tell, but the workers could have been better trained and could have had better supervision over the disaster. No, since the radioactivity is spread in a very high speed and it can't stop once it is released. The disaster was in Ukraine, in Europe, in the Soviet Union, so Mexico was not in the range of the radioactive pollution generated by this disaster. One of the consequences caused by this disaster was the contamination of the air in Ukraine and its surroundings caused by the radioactivity. It killed many people over the years and it is still a problem. Another consequence of this disaster was that it was partially responsible for 7,000 cases of thyroid cancer in young teens and adults.
What are the environmental consequences in the global scale of nuclear disasters and use of nuclear weapons? In our opinion, it's hard to understand why people nowadays risk their lives to prove something. This nuclear case was an accident by a military program and it didn't have enough security to handle the consequences. How did we feel working like this? It was kinda weird because we don't know each other, but in a good way to know people, to interact even though we don't know the other team. Do we like it? Yes, it was a good way to know how other people work and how to get out of the same circle of people you work with. Was it difficult? No. The only thing that was kind of difficult was the contact with each other, but out of that, everything was okay. What do we like most about working with teammates from this form? That even though we don't know each other and we don't know the way all we work, we didn't have any problems on working together as a team.